There's a lesson about human nature that most people learn too late. And when they finally learn it, they usually learn it through pain. You trusted someone. You believed their words. You believed their promises. You believed that because you had been loyal to them, they would naturally be loyal to you. You believed that because you would never betray them, they would never betray you. And then one day, something changed. They stopped answering your messages. They became distant. They started treating you differently. Perhaps they found someone more useful. Perhaps their priorities changed. Perhaps they discovered something they wanted more than the relationship you shared. Or perhaps you simply stopped being valuable to them. And suddenly, you are forced to confront a painful question. Did I ever really know this person? This is where Niccolò Machiavelli enters the conversation. Machiavelli was not famous because he taught people how to be good. He became famous because he was willing to examine people without the comforting illusions that morality often gives us. He looked at politics, power, loyalty, fear, ambition, betrayal, and human relationships and asked a disturbing question. What happens when people are no longer guided by what they promised, but by what benefits them? And that question is at the heart of one of Machiavelli's darkest lessons. Never place your entire security in another person's loyalty. Not because everyone is evil, not because everyone will betray you, but because people change. Their interests change. Their circumstances change. Their desires change. And when circumstances change, relationships can change with them. This is a lesson that many people misunderstand. Machiavelli was not simply saying, trust nobody. That would be too simplistic. His deeper lesson was about understanding the limits of trust. You can love someone without surrendering your judgment. You can trust someone without making yourself completely dependent on them. You can be loyal without becoming blind. And you can believe someone's character while still understanding that human beings are capable of changing. This distinction is extremely important because one of the most dangerous things you can do in life is confuse trust with certainty. Trust says, I believe you. Blind certainty says, you could never change. Those are not the same thing. And the second one is where people get destroyed. Think about the average relationship. A person meets someone. They become close. They begin sharing secrets. They spend time together. They help each other. Eventually, familiarity creates comfort. And comfort creates assumptions. You begin assuming they will always be there. You assume they will always answer. You assume they will always defend you. You assume they will always choose you. You assume they will always remember what you have done for them. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin building expectations around another human being. This is where disappointment begins. Because expectations are often invisible contracts. You may never have told the person, you owe me loyalty. But somewhere inside your mind, you believe they do. Why? Because you helped them. Because you were there when nobody else was. Because you defended them. Because you listened to them. Because you sacrificed for them. Because you believed in them. And therefore, you expect reciprocity. You expect the world to operate according to your definition of fairness. But human beings do not always operate according to fairness. They operate according to perception, interest, emotion, fear, ambition, opportunity, and self-preservation. That is what makes Machiavelli so uncomfortable. He forces you to examine something most people would rather ignore. People can appreciate what you have done for them and still choose themselves when the stakes become high enough. Let that sink in. Someone can genuinely love you and still choose themselves. Someone can genuinely appreciate you and still abandon you. Someone can be sincere today and different tomorrow. This does not necessarily make them evil. It makes them human. And understanding that difference can save you from enormous disappointment. Imagine two friends. Friend A has been helping friend B for years. Whenever friend B needs money, friend A helps. Whenever friend B needs advice, friend A listens. Whenever friend B is in trouble, friend A appears. Eventually, friend A develops a belief. If I ever need help, B will be there for me. But one day, friend A needs something serious. He calls friend B. No answer. He calls again. Nothing. Days pass. Eventually, friend B explains, I had my own problems. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. But friend A is devastated. Not necessarily because B refused to help, but because the refusal violated an expectation. Friend A thought the relationship had an unwritten rule. B never agreed to that rule. And this is one of the most painful truths about relationships. The expectations you carry in your mind may exist only in your mind. You can sacrifice for someone and secretly expect them to sacrifice for you. You can remain loyal to someone and secretly expect loyalty in return. You can forgive someone repeatedly and expect them to never hurt you again. But people are not contracts. They are moving targets. Their values evolve. Their priorities change. Their circumstances change. Their ambitions grow. Their fears increase. Their social circles change. Their financial situations change. Their identities change. And sometimes, the person who needed you yesterday no longer needs you tomorrow. That is where changing loyalties become important. Loyalty is often presented as if it were a permanent personality trait. But in reality, loyalty can be influenced by circumstances. A person may be loyal to you when your interests align. They may remain loyal when the cost of loyalty is low. But what happens when loyalty becomes expensive? What happens when standing beside you threatens their career, their reputation, their relationship, their money, their social position, their future? That is when you discover the difference between convenient loyalty and tested loyalty. Anyone can stand beside you when standing beside you costs nothing. The real test comes when loyalty demands sacrifice. And even then, there are no guarantees. This is why Machiavelli's philosophy remains relevant centuries later. He understood that people are often motivated by incentives. Change the incentives, and you may change the behavior. Consider a workplace. You have a colleague who is extremely friendly. You eat together. You joke together. You share information. You believe you have a genuine friendship. Then suddenly, a promotion becomes available. Both of you want it. The atmosphere changes. The person who was laughing with you yesterday may now be competing against you. And suddenly, you discover that friendship and competition can coexist. But they do not always survive together. Perhaps they begin withholding information. Perhaps they become more politically strategic. Perhaps they start speaking differently to management. Perhaps they stop helping you. You may feel betrayed. But Machiavelli would probably ask a different question. What changed? The person didn't necessarily become a completely different human being overnight. The incentives changed. The environment changed. The stakes changed. And the person's behavior adapted. This is one of the most important principles you can learn about human behavior. Never judge someone's loyalty only by how they behave when there is nothing to lose. Watch what happens when interests collide. Watch what happens when they have something significant to gain. Watch what happens when helping you becomes inconvenient. Watch what happens when telling you the truth could cost them something. Watch what happens when they gain power over you. Because power reveals relationships. Money reveals relationships. Competition reveals relationships. Success reveals relationships. Failure reveals relationships. And opportunity reveals relationships. Sometimes you don't truly know someone until the situation gives them a reason to behave differently. That sounds dark, but it is not necessarily cynical. It is simply realistic. The mistake is not trusting people. The mistake is believing that trust eliminates uncertainty. It doesn't. Trust is a calculated vulnerability. Every time you trust someone, you are giving them the ability to affect you. You tell someone a secret. Now they have power over your privacy. You give someone money. Now they have power over your finances. You depend on someone emotionally. Now they have power over your emotional stability. You give someone control over your business. Now they have power over your livelihood. You make someone your only source of support. Now they have power over your survival. And the more power you give another person, the more dangerous betrayal becomes. This is why you should never completely surrender yourself to another person's promises. Not your entire identity. Not your entire financial future. Not your entire emotional stability. Not your entire social world. Not your entire sense of worth. Because when you make one person responsible for everything you have, you don't merely create trust. You create dependency. And dependency can turn even a healthy relationship into a dangerous one. Machiavelli's lesson, then, is not love nobody. It is, do not become helpless because you love someone. There is a difference. You can love deeply and remain observant. You can be generous and maintain boundaries. You can trust someone and still have a backup plan. You can believe in someone's character while understanding that circumstances can test that character. This is not paranoia. It is preparation. Think about a bridge. You cross a bridge because you trust that it will hold your weight. But you don't remove every other road from existence because you believe the bridge will never fail. You don't say, I trust this bridge, therefore I no longer need another route. That would be foolish. And yet, people do this with relationships every day. They meet one person and make them their entire world. One friend becomes their entire social circle. One partner becomes their entire emotional support system. One client becomes their entire source of income. One business becomes their entire financial strategy. One opportunity becomes their entire future. Then, when that thing collapses, their entire life collapses with it. The wiser approach is not distrust. It is resilience. Build relationships, but also build yourself. Love people, but do not abandon your identity. Accept help, but develop your own capabilities. Trust people, but keep your judgment. Give loyalty, but don't confuse loyalty with self-destruction. And most importantly, do not measure your worth by another person's decision to stay. Because one of the darkest forms of dependence is needing another person to choose you in order to feel valuable. That is when trust becomes dangerous. When someone's attention becomes your validation. When their approval becomes your confidence. When their presence becomes your identity. When their loyalty becomes your security. Because now, if they leave, you don't just lose the relationship, you lose yourself. And that is exactly what you must avoid. Machiavelli understood something about power that applies far beyond politics. The person who needs the other person more usually has less power. Think about negotiations. If you desperately need the deal and the other person doesn't, you are vulnerable. If you desperately need the relationship and the other person doesn't, you are vulnerable. If you desperately need someone's approval and they know it, you are vulnerable. Need creates leverage. And this is why emotional independence is so powerful. It does not mean becoming cold. It means knowing that you can survive without being chosen. You can walk away. You can rebuild. You can continue. You can love someone without needing them to validate your existence. That is freedom. And perhaps this is the real lesson hidden beneath Machiavelli's darker philosophy. The goal is not to become suspicious of everyone. The goal is to become strong enough that betrayal cannot completely destroy you. Because betrayal will happen. Disappointment will happen. People will change. Some friendships will end. Some relationships will collapse. Some promises will be broken. Some people you trusted will eventually show you a side of themselves you never expected. And when that happens, you will have two choices. You can become bitter, or you can become wiser. You can say, nobody can be trusted. Or you can say, I now understand what trust actually means. The first response creates paranoia. The second creates wisdom. So don't stop trusting people. Stop worshiping trust. Don't stop loving people. Stop making people your entire world. Don't stop being loyal. Stop expecting everyone to have the exact same definition of loyalty that you have. And don't become cruel because someone disappointed you. Become observant. Become discerning. Become emotionally independent. Because the strongest person in the room is not necessarily the person who trusts nobody. It may be the person who can trust others without becoming dependent on them. The person who can love without losing themselves. The person who can give without secretly demanding repayment. The person who can recognize betrayal without allowing it to destroy their character. That is the difference between innocence and wisdom. And if you remember nothing else from this video, remember this. People are not always loyal to who you are. Sometimes they are loyal to what you represent. Your usefulness, your resources, your status, your connections, your attention, your protection, your money, your influence, your ability to make their life easier. And when those things disappear, the relationship may change. That doesn't mean every relationship is fake. It means you should understand what holds every relationship together. Interests, values, emotions, shared history, mutual respect, circumstances, and sometimes necessity. The moment you understand this, you stop taking every change personally. You stop asking, why did they change? And you begin asking, what changed? That question is far more powerful because sometimes the person didn't suddenly become evil. Their circumstances changed. Their priorities changed. Their incentives changed. Their perception changed. And their loyalty changed with them. That is the uncomfortable reality of human relationships. And once you understand it, you will never look at trust the same way again.